Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Curriculum Subcommittee meeting, February 27th, 2024. First order of business is to approve the minutes of January 16th. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move that.
Thank you, Stephen. A second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you. Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Natalia?
I'm going to abstain because I didn't get to read them. Sorry.
Okay, and I vote yes as well. Okay, so our next order of business is looking at the after-school physical activity contract. And Carlin, are you going to take us through that?
Carlin's not here.
Carlin's not here?
I don't see
Is
her.
Gabe here?
No.
I don't see them yet. I'll text Gabe to see what's happening.
Okay. She thinks she's going to be here, or she thought she would be.
Yeah, no, she is going to be here.
Maybe we did the minutes too fast.
Well, I am moving us along because we do have a 6 o'clock meeting. So with the school committees, just for people who are watching and may not know. And so we are trying to be done by 5:30 if we can. So people can get ready.
Do we want to start our second item and then move back to the first?
We could. Have we
Does
heard
anybody-
Betsy from them?
I'm sorry.
Have we heard from Gabe and from Carlin at all?
I have not heard back from him yet. No.
Okay, so we can start work backwards a little bit. So we were going to talk a little bit about co-teaching. We call this the initial discussion because to have a full discussion, we really need, of course, to have special services here with us. But we thought that maybe we could start a conversation here and kind of come up with the themes and the questions that we're going to want answered, so we have the right people in place and get the answers we want. So co-teaching happens at the high school in, I don't know how many classrooms, 50 classrooms, I want to say. It's increased pretty significantly in the last number of years. I think one thing we want is just kind of an explanation of what is co-teaching, what does it look like, and how does a class become a co-teaching class, and what are those guidelines? And I'll just throw it open to people. What are some thoughts you have, questions, concerns, or part of the conversation?
One thing that I would be interested in hearing about is I assume co-teaching is in place of pulling out a student or a student having a learning center, correct? Oh, okay, that would be a question.
That would be a question.
Yeah, and so I'd like to understand on a couple different levels, the difference in outcomes for kids, individual kids who are either co-taught in a class versus in a learning center, how they do in whatever that topic is, and the cost for both of those. Is there, yeah, those are two things that I would like to know.
Suzanne, I guess for me, it's hard for me to think about co-teaching as its own topic, because it seems like it's part of an overall topic about resource allocation, or it has to be part of it, unless there's a pedagogical piece of co-teaching, and there's also a resource allocation piece of co-teaching, and to take it without the resource allocation piece is hard for me to digest, because surely having additional resources in every classroom would be beneficial. So I would want to know I guess along the lines of what Helen is saying, what how does it work along both dimensions, the pedagogical and the resource allocation?
Stephen, can you say more about what you mean about the resource allocation questions? Like, I think I know how to talk
Sure.
about pedagogy, or like,
So, I mean, so classroom instruction benefits from assistant teachers to co-teachers, anything along the spectrum of support, for the most part, right? Anything that helps with student-teacher ratio, most broadly. I'm really boiling it down. So by what criteria are classes determined to have a need for additional support? And by what criteria does it get elevated to a co-teaching classroom? Is it something about the material itself? Is it something about the demand for the material? Is there something about the nature of the material, or some combination thereof? That would help me to understand.
that's super helpful. Thanks.
Natalia?
And I know we're only talking about the high school, but conceptually, and maybe I want to hear more, like, is having a para in first grade in every classroom a co-teaching model, like, or those are different models? Like, I'd like to see conceptually, like, what are we talking about? Is it really just for, what does it mean? And like, I think for me, I'm kind of new to this area, and I agree with Stephen, like, is it that we're saying it's a different model from, or Helen, what you were saying, pull out? Or is it a completely different pedagogical model so that we can mix, now that we're talking about sort of de-leveling, like that, I could imagine a co-teaching model to allow for teachers having flexibility to teach across levels, or in SWS, is there co-teaching? Like, I just don't know what exists and what are the different models of co-teaching and what their purpose is. Is it to support kids on IEPs, or is it to support high achievers, or is it to support, or in kindergarten class, like, why do we have paras in kindergarten and first grade? Like, all of that for me, to present it as a sort of a philosophy. And then the budget, I do think the finance team, like, I'm sure Mariah being here, for example, would be very helpful to think about, is it a cost saving, or is it actually an investment that we're making? Because those would, kind of frame how we want to see more of this, but I mean, I feel quite new to this, so I feel like I would need a 101, even like what we're calling co-teaching versus having, paras.
And I want to speak right after Natalia, because that's like the start of what I wanted to say. And I just wanted to say, to find out, is co-teaching what permits us for our inclusion model? Is it dependent on that? And then also, are we making choices in middle school differently than high school based on like, is the decision to use a para versus a teacher as the second teacher happening more often at the middle school and elementary level than it is the high school?
Other thoughts from people?
And I think we I think there is some co-teaching at the elementary school. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gabe, you probably know. Especially in the inclusions at Runkle, I think sometimes the special ed teacher comes in with the group.
Yeah, I think
Sure.
you raise a really good like differentiation of the models, right? Because what we tend to see at middle school and elementary is like a push in, where a special educator might be there, but not every day, versus two teachers are there every day, right? Versus a para is there every day, or a para there sometimes, right? So I think unpacking the different versions of things sounds like it'd be really helpful.
And why?
Yeah.
Well, and co-teaching, in my mind, is something different from a push in support. So again, maybe taking a really a deep dive maybe into the model, and maybe we use several models, I don't know. So that might be of interest.
And things like, is there a primary teacher or are they equal level? Like what's that sort of
Right.
thing? Are they paid the same? Or, clearly in the para model, it's not, there is like a lead teacher, but is co-teaching. I feel like the heritage conversation that we had, they were going to be two sort of equal teachers. So I'd like to know when we make those decisions.
I also would maybe like to know, how that comes to be, that some students have co-teaching in their IEPs and some do not. And do we make that decision in 8th grade and then it sticks with the student throughout their career at high school? Do we re-evaluate that at the annual meetings every year? And, what does that look like? So, and does it happen more first year in high school and less in senior year, or, and then where has the increase been in the last couple of years? I think that there's been a fairly significant increase in the number of co-teaching classes. So what are those classes and how have they been successful or not?
And maybe to include the tutorial in this. I mean, if we're talking about all the ways that we try to help students to understand that.
I think a distinction that is important, right, is that tutorial is a general ed service, and these other things we've talked about have been special ed services. So I wonder if that might be better as a separate conversation, just because I think this list is already quite long.
Okay.
It's good stuff. It's the right stuff. It's just putting them together is sometimes confusing.
I think some people see tutorial as an alternative to having an IEP.
That wouldn't surprise me.
And so that's why I was including it, but.
Natalia?
And Natalia doesn't know what tutorial is.
I know, I sort of know what tutorial is, but peripherally, I don't actually know. Class size, that has been a big thing. Like, does co-teaching change your thinking around class size, or is it because of the composition and class size should stay the same? I'd be curious about that.
I also might want to think about the conversation of co-teaching and students only getting extra help if they have that in their IEPs, or is every student in the classroom kind of eligible for the extra support? How do the teachers feel? How do they view themselves?
And how does it work in reality?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
I mean, there's the theory, I assume, but I was in a classroom with a co-teacher, but it wasn't clear to me what that teacher was doing. Not, it may have just been that day, I don't know.
Got that, Gabe? All set?
Is there any other big themes that we've kind of missed? I'm wondering. I don't know what it might be.
I don't know, if you want to make us do homework, give us some sort of short, pieces on co-teaching.
So our plan,
just so that we talk from knowledge as opposed to. You're laughing.
I believe our plan is to take these questions back to OSS as well and come back and then be able to answer them for you to do a co-teaching tutorial, if you will, and along with co-teaching 101 for all of you. But we wanted to be able to be sure that we were actually answering the questions that you had. So thank you.
So some of the thought had been that we would have this conversation in the future in the curriculum subcommittee, and perhaps not going to the full committee since there's not really a vote. So any committee member could join us, so you don't have to do it twice is what we were thinking. So give that some thought if that makes sense or not.
I would like to, I guess one other thing, because it just dawned on me. Before we did co-teaching, what was the cost of special ed? And now that we're doing it, what is the cost? If that's feasible to even, and if it's comparing apples to apples, it may be comparing. You know, we may have done something different. There may not have been as many kids, whatever. So the cost could be different.
Okay, anybody else have another word on co-teaching? Jody, did you have anything you wanted to jump in and say? No? I
No,
think-
I think these are great questions, and we will work on getting the answers and bring them back to this wonderful team.
Okay, so if you have some thoughts, I guess you can just send them to Gabe, right, Gabe? If there's something else that comes up, you know, like you're eating at dinner and say, oh my gosh, I thought of this and I forgot to say it, just send an email over to Gabe. He's good about that. And always good at that. Thank you. So we are going to move on. Carlin's here. Good, welcome. And we're going to turn this over to you and talk to us about the after-school physical activity contracts.
Thanks, Suzanne. Coming at you from Lawrence Library. Just had our health teacher department meeting. It was wonderful, and we were talking afterwards. So I wanted to apologize for my tardiness, but it was because I was doing good work with teachers. So I'm here today just to discuss with y'all some aspects of how people earn credit for wellness at Brookline High School, and specifically about a thing called the after-school physical activity contracts. So I'll start with my slides. I hope I'm able to share my screen. If not,
Carlin, I'm just going to jump in one bit
Yeah.
while you can set up. I just want to clarify for the committee and folks, this is kind of through some discussions Carlin and I and Jody and Michelle have had for a while. This hasn't, like, we have, the high school leadership are not here, right? Like, we haven't necessarily like vetted them through this. Like, we're trying to talk about ideas, right? Again, we're not asking for any particular vote. We're not hoping for that. It's really opening up a discussion.
thanks, Gabe. Oh. So in terms of how people can earn, it might be good for me then to frame sort of how you get credit at Brookline High School, as we're talking discussion based around how a student can earn their wellness credit. So you can take a BHS wellness course, you know, offered by a licensed wellness teacher. You can participate and complete a BHS interscholastic sport, which is monitored by Public Schools of Brookline coach and the athletic director. And then the third way is a thing called the after-school physical activity contract. However, these contracts are difficult to be eligible for based on the criteria. And I believe that Gabe shared the entire slideshow with you prior to this presentation. But basically, some of the eligibility criteria is that, you know, you have to be participating in something not offered at Brookline High School. And since we offer so many amazing programs at Brookline High School, as well as our sports programming is some of the, I think it's the biggest in the east of the Mississippi or something like that. You know, there's really a number of ways in which students can earn their credit and should earn their credit at Brookline with Brookline staff. And the rationale to sort of phase out these contracts is that, you know, they don't meet they're not aligned with the Massachusetts physical education requirements. Physical activity per se is not physical education. We, you know, have the new DESE frameworks, which were just approved in the fall, and, you know, they're not aligned with this. And they don't even align with our new wellness policy that was voted in in early February. So, you know, these contracts, this sort of getting credit for participating in some kind of physical activity outside of school, are not aligned with any of the Public Schools of Brookline ethos and sort of what we want to do in terms of making sure that students are getting education. It also perpetuates myths around like what physical education is. And to that point, you know, we're not giving performing arts credit to a student that takes music lessons outside of school. We're not, you know, giving English credit to a student that publishes a book. So we know that students participate in a wide variety of extracurricular activities that enhance their passion or their education. But we don't give Brookline High School credit for that, right? And we want to think a little bit about the intentionality around that. Lack of accountability. they're not having a touch point with a teacher or coach or someone that is, you know, a staff member. So there's lack of accountability there. There's lack of sort of authentic assessment. It creates confusion for families. You know, families often will email me or write me and say, my child's working out at this gym. Why can't they get credit? And, you know, we want to make sure that we're clear with what a wellness education looks like and what a course and what credit earning work looks like. It's out of step with other districts, and I'm going to show you some interesting data in a moment. But then there's also this declining participation. So we're not talking about a lot of students that would, you know, not, you know, we're going from, you know, 100 kids having access to something that they're not going to have access to. We're talking about 2-3 kids a year. And I also just want to say about this part.
Carolyn, could you explain this? Because I'm confused. Kids who are like in soccer or
That's different.
Okay.
That's different. Yep. Helena, that's called a sports contract, not an after-school physical activity contract. Hence the confusion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Actually,
That's helpful.
Carlin, could you even take one more step back?
Yeah.
Define contract.
Yes. So currently, if you're in Brookline High School and you, first of all, everyone must earn wellness credit every year. It's a state law. It's part of, right? So they have to participate in K-8 level. They have physical education twice a week, right? Then you get to high school. The only, you still have to earn wellness credit every year, but there's a couple different ways to do it. We have our 9th grade class, which is mandatory, our 0900 lifetime wellness class, which all students have to take, right? And then that's one semester. And then after that, when they're 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, they still have to earn wellness credit every year as part of their high school education as well. But they can do it in a couple different ways. One, they can take a course, and we offer dynamic programming. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end in terms of scheduling, because I know that might be a question for people. And they are also allowed to participate in a BHS sport, like a sport at Brookline High School, not, you know, a club sport outside of Brookline High School. And then there's this third way, which is what I'm here talking to you all about today, which is called an after-school physical activity contract, which is essentially an agreement that they're going to do a certain amount of physical activity outside of school and get wellness credit that way. Currently, yeah,
Can I
go
jump
ahead.
in a little bit? I think a good distinction, right? If you think about the sports, right? So a student who does like Brookline High soccer can get credit for doing Brookline High soccer as the interscholastic sport. But if they do like select soccer on their own, they can't get credit for that, right? Because it's not a Brookline High activity. But then there's this small range. And again, kind of using, currently there's 2 students, last year there were 3, who do some activity generally at a pretty high level. So we've had a rock climber, we've had folks who do equestrian, things that we don't offer.
A figure skater.
Yeah.
National level.
Right.
And so we've, for a while, right, if they have a full schedule and they have no space in their schedule for a wellness class,
And they're participating in something not offered at Brookline High. So the rock climber had to be an Olympic level rock climber. So
because we have a rock
climbing. And
but then, so again, this distinction is they're earning credit for something that is really not supervised by Brookline.
Right. And to Gabe's point about like sort of outside of school, then it requires like, you know, there's just a lot of conversations around this and eligibility. And every year I answer so many, you know, emails about this because it's confusing for families and students. And I think we need to think about being very clear about, you can get high school wellness credit, take a wellness class, participate in the sport, and then, you know, move on. And I wanted to show other districts, like what they offer. And none of the other districts listed here offer a after-school physical activity contract. Some offer the sports contracts, but most of them do not offer either. And that's not a conversation we're having today, but I wanted you to at least have that data. And I thought it was interesting that Cambridge actually added a requirement back in for 11th grade health. So even though they do allow sports contract, you still have to take like an 11th grade health class now in Cambridge. And the Weston thing just changed like a year ago or 2 years ago. But this is data from other districts that shows they don't even have this. And then, you know, sort of other context is that it's not in line with the national and state guidance, that, you know, it should be, physical education should be taught as a required subject in all grades. And we really shouldn't allow waivers or, you know, substitutions, if you will. And I think that I'm going to stop sharing because I think that's the end of my slideshow. Gabe, did I forget anything, or is there anything I should have?
No, I think the hope was just to, you know, this is a policy and a practice that's been around for a while. As you kind of saw on the chart, there used to be more students participating in this and taking advantage of this. We changed the requirements a while ago to kind of focus it and narrow it, and it really is for sort of edge cases. As you might imagine from some of the discussion about like kids doubling up in subjects, right? Like if a student doesn't have a wellness class in their schedule, they're taking something else usually. Or sometimes we hear students who want to have a free block because they're taking 4 or 5 AP classes or something like that. So it is a small group of students, but part of the confusion is that Carlin regularly fields questions about like, is my student eligible for this, right? Or is this program eligible for this? Or we do this other thing. And because Brookline High offers so much, very few students are actually eligible.
Right.
But it is kind of a confusing, burdensome thing that then is, again, to Carlin's point, like, unlike every other department, again, no one else is offering credit for things that don't happen at Brookline High.
And then
Let
I
me
will.
ask, can I ask a question
Sure.
on that last statement? So kids can do independent study, and that
But
can.
that's with a teacher. That's with a teacher, and that's probably, and there must be like entire processes, like they're not
It's
going.
not always with the teacher. Sometimes I think it's like taking courses outside. No, isn't it? Or
There's a dual enrollment. I know there's a dual enrollment situation and to your point, Helen, like if I am in a situation where I have to work with other leaders within the school to make sure that we are accommodating a nuanced situation with a student, I'm absolutely going to continue to do that.
okay, that's the part
different. And that's what actually, that was the point I wanted to bring up. Like we will continue to do, you know, the trauma sensitive approaches, the other approaches that we need to do to make sure that students have opportunities to get their wellness credit and do it in a way that's supportive of students. And I've actually also very intentionally in the last, I want to say, well, I've only been in this job for 3-4 years now, but in the last 3 or 4 years, I have been working with, to Gabe's point, with Ed Weiser, with Dan Bresman. I schedule courses opposite SWS town meeting. I schedule courses opposite the AP science labs. I schedule Z-block classes. Like I have probably the most staff, except for maybe performing arts, that's doing Z-block. And, you know, that's always difficult as well for my department, because if you teach Z-block, you can't with the schedule teach F or G. So I'm doing almost a giant Jenga matrix trying to schedule to make sure that I have availability for students so that they will have the flexibility within their schedule to take those, you know, to take the electives that they might want to take or to take the multiple classes that they want to take. But this after school physical activity contract is something that, you know, it's not in line with any of our, what we believe to be credit worthy work. And the accountability is not there. And someone outside of our district, outside of our school is saying yes to credit for our students. And I don't think that's right.
Carlin,
Yes.
and am I correct, as I'm still learning about these, being this is the first district I've been in that's offered them, this option is in the course catalog, correct?
It is, but not, I think currently right now it's not in the course catalog for this year because we were hoping that this meeting was gonna happen a little bit earlier. We can add it back in. That's the other thing is we are going into the course selection meetings. But because it's in the catalog every year, I get tons of questions about it. And I think it's so confusing for families. I mean, what do you think about that,
What
Gabe?
happens to that Olympic level skater, rock climber, whatever, who,
So I would argue that they're probably the people that need the yoga class the most. I would argue that they probably need, and actually, I will say this, I will give an example, and I won't say the student because, you know, I don't have the permission to, but I
sure,
had an Olympic level athlete do a contract the first year, and then the next year, because they didn't have a full schedule, they had to actually take a yoga class. And they, at the end of it all, they said, you know, that was kind of nice to have that meditation, that break up in my day, right? So, and to be honest with you, Helen, because the classes are only 2 days a week at the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade level, unless you're taking a 0.5 course, which is our revolution and our advanced wellness. All of our courses can usually dovetail another activity for the or if they want to have a like a study hall approach or whatever, they've got 2 classes opposite their wellness class where they can get their work done and stuff like that. So it doesn't tend to eat up the schedule the way it used to because we've done really intentional scheduling around the heavy, I do it around the scholars seminars, like I right?
Natalie, did you have a question? I thought you-
Yeah, and I'm sorry because this is all so news to me. So the terminology, so wellness classes include yoga, sports. You said performing arts. So is dance wellness or is dance performing arts?
That's a great question. So it can be both.
Okay.
You can, if you take a dance course at Brookline High School, it can be your wellness credit. It just depends on, you know,
Okay.
how much.
So you're quite flexible in what is included and the requirement by state is every year, 9th, 10th, 11th.
Every year. And then in terms of like sort of credits at Brookline High School, it has to be at least 0.25 credits. So some students, like, let's say they have a situation, and this is, I'll be explaining to parents, seniors tomorrow, rising senior parents tomorrow morning, that, you know, if they planned on doing a sport or they planned on taking a class or they were taking a class and it didn't work out, or if they ever need recovery credit, they can take a course, they can take 2 courses or they can take one of our 0.5 courses for recovery credit, but they just can't take like initial credit during the school year. So I couldn't double up my sophomore year and then not take anything my, you know, junior and senior year type of thing.
Got it.
So
Again, this is a real distinction with how the law is written, right?
Right.
So for English, for example, we require 4 credits for graduation. The law says you must have a wellness class every year, K through 12. And so it's a unique situation for wellness that doesn't really apply to the other subjects in the same way.
right.
Right.
But to your point, we do offer all types of classes, strength and conditioning classes, yoga classes, swimming, advanced lifeguarding. Like you can get your lifeguard license at Brookline High as a student, you know? So we have dynamic programming, net games, we use the pavilion, so we do have a lot of differentiated programming. And then of course, you know, with the sports contracts, there's 42 sports I think we have. I'm not sure what it is,
not
but
39, but I may be wrong.
yeah.
There were
It's
more women's sports than men teams.
So we're talking about getting rid of something that is rare, but it's confusing parents.
And
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
And students, and, you know, is not done in pretty much any other district.
Okay. And is that something that, Suzanne, we vote on, we recommend it goes to school, like the full school committee?
Yeah, does it have to, so maybe Jody knows, Gabe knows, does that, this is, we seem to be tripping over this.
Yes, we do
if-
seem to be tripping.
Do
Yeah.
we?
I
so
think-
For
we're
today, we're just bringing this information to you. We're not asking for a vote specifically because we haven't discussed it with Anthony and Hal and the senior administrative team at the high school. You guys are actually getting it first. But we would, because it is, and this is why I asked the question about the course catalog, because it would be a change to that. We would have the school committee vote on it, just to be certain that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's procedurally.
And I think this is where, again, this to me is a little bit different than a regular course, because we do sometimes not run courses.
Right.
Due to low enrollment, for example, right? That's African American Studies this year, unfortunately, was low enrolled, but we didn't take African American Studies out of the catalog, right? And so like there's like a subtlety of distinction there. But again, to Jody's point, there's some work to do with the high school and having that conversation as well.
Well, it's a little unusual because it's not a course, it's a contract. So, I mean, you could argue that 2 would be a low enrollment if that's all you have. But, and you know, maybe that's even justification in a sense for even the time that you have to put in, you know, for this. So, Stephen?
So why are contracts there? Is this just a legacy of something that used to be valuable, or is there some constituency of BHS students and families that prefer it this way?
I have my thoughts. I think that there was possibly a need for them prior to the real intentional scheduling and flexibility and messaging that we've done now around, you know, it's difficult to get them now. So because you have to have a full schedule, right? So it's not a situation where, you know, if you used to go work out at Planet Fitness, you would get a contract and then get a free period during the school day. Like once that transition happened, I think that the contracts really declined.
I mean, I'll also say, right, and Carlin alluded to this in her slides, right, that there's differences of opinion about the value of physical education and kind of what physical education is, right? If I think about my gym class, that was basically physical activity, right? That is not the physical education classes that I see in Brookline. And I didn't learn about nutrition. I didn't learn about how my body works, right? I didn't learn about all of these things that
Mindfulness, Gabe.
Yep, there's all kinds of things, right? And so, you know, I think we have families that when they're looking at like, should my kid take a wellness class or should my kid take a science class? Finding a way to not take the wellness class, right?
So so
different activity.
kids are contracting their way out of this requirement basically altogether. So just to boil it down, getting rid of contracts is a way of more mindfully prioritizing physical education. Helen, am I getting this right?
Well, so depends which contracts you're talking about. These ones I can deal with. I'm okay on this.
Yeah, I think a helpful context, right, is this is a very small number of students, right? The sports, like what Desi would call actually a substitution for the wellness class, right? Desi would call sports a substitution. That's about 900 students a year. That's a very different situation. So again, we're keeping that off the table.
Good.
So, but for
okay
those students who are making that substitution, what will they do in the absence of contracts?
You mean that the 2 or 3 people that are getting them in the last couple of years?
Maybe I
They
misunderstood what you just said,
they-
Gabe. Were you just saying that there were a large number of students who were using
No, those
contracts?
students we're not talking about. Those are the,
Yeah, there's the sports, like taking a Brookline High. This is why it's confusing, right? It's perfect. You're having the exact dilemma that everyone has.
I will be the guinea pig for confusion here.
So we have Brookline High sports that
Mhm.
you can earn wellness credit for. Approximately 900 plus students a year take advantage of that. Hugely involved. And then there's the after school physical activity contracts, which is single digit students, less than 5. That we're talking about the latter.
So it's not an organized sport per se. It's not, for the most part, it's usually an individual type thing.
like equestrian, horseback riding.
I think
Yeah.
in some ways more to the point is it's not supervised and overseen by Brookline High staff. Even our coaches, while they might be part-time, they might only be with us as a coach. They are hired by us. They are quarried and fingerprinted by us, right? They are supervised by the athletic director. They're part of Brookline as a system, which is really different than saying, I have
Yes.
a equestrian.
Yeah, I guess for my part, it doesn't seem bad necessarily that not overseen by Brookline personnel that doesn't seem like the bad category. I mean, I could think, when I was in school, I would have taken like a college credit course outside of my high school. That's okay. I mean, there are plenty of examples where I think what it is that maybe there isn't sufficient oversight of what those opportunities are, right?
Also, it's not equatable, like if you were performing arts and you happen to be playing on or doing a private music something or other collective, Kenny's not giving performing arts credit for that, right? He's not overseeing that. He's not.
I
Does
think
that?
the distinction I might make, Stephen, is in your example of a college course, right? That's still being overseen by an accredited credit granting institution.
Right. I'm
We
just
are,
making the distinction between
Yeah.
quality oversight has to be performed somewhere.
yeah,
But
this
it
case,
doesn't necessarily have to be performed by BHS, so long as there's a partner involved that BHS trusts that's doing the quality oversight.
these are all individual cases.
Also,
Yeah,
we're,
I'm just saying that requiring BHS to do the quality oversight itself doesn't seem to be necessary.
well, except that, Stephen, I'm thinking that BHS is giving the credit.
It is
And
going on the
in which
BHS
case,
transcript.
we're accountable for it. Whereas
Right.
in a dual program, let's say the community college is giving credit and they're accountable for it. So
Yeah.
I think there is a
I think we're in agreement.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that
Okay.
it doesn't have to be the direct oversight by BHS. It could be a partner that BHS agrees is responsible for giving credit. Maybe this is not on point.
There's also some potential equity issues here. When you think about the cost that's involved with students performing at a high level, and many parents make sacrifices, I understand, for their students to do that, but it's not something that may be available to all students. This is not an option that could be or even should be available to all students. So I think from an equity point of view, even though we're talking to students this year, that's something that we as a committee might want to be mindful when we think about our commitment to equity and providing an equitable education for all students.
And it's not available to students for resource reasons, like they wouldn't.
Right, because parents are paying for this above and beyond the school day.
I see.
Yeah.
Whereas like our sports teams, we will subsidize with financial assistance, right? So students can participate in sports even if they don't have the finances to.
And equity issue is not the main issue here. I think there are other ones that probably rise much higher in terms of why this makes sense, whether it's the staff time that's taken, the supervision of it, all those things I think would be much more to the point. If you have somebody dancing in the Boston Ballet, what is that, for instance? Where does that person who has to spend hours doing that?
As it stands, they would not be eligible for these contracts, right? Because we offer dance.
And I would say
it's wonderful and it's great, but it's not credit.
Yeah, I think it's this credit piece, and I heard Stephen say something just to clarify. So when you get a Brookline diploma, Brookline has given you the credits, Brookline has bestowed the credits. Even when we have students come back from places like homeschool, where it's something a family is choosing to do and choosing to provide that education, when they come back to us, we don't give them the credits. We say, this is where you're going into your classes. But Brookline does not suddenly bestow all those credits that a student needs to graduate upon the family. And I think to me, it sounds a little like there's some confusion among us saying like, okay, you went and did it somewhere else. We are going to give you the credits. And then we are that responsible party to the state. We are that institution that's been given the rights to give the credit. Because like the Boston Ballet is not a credit providing provider.
So I'm gonna kind of move us along, I think, unless there's some more questions to ask. Do you want a straw vote from us?
That would be
saying
wonderful.
That would be wonderful, especially as I go into the course selection meetings.
Okay, so I don't know if this eventually has to go to policy or not. I don't know. That needs to be changed, but I would like to move that we have a straw vote that we would, what do we need to do? Drop the after school sports contract option?
Activity
I
contract.
think you should say the word physical activity contract so it doesn't get confused with the sports contracts.
Okay, so physical. Did you get that, Beth?
After school physical activity contract.
Got it.
Thanks.
Okay, did someone want to second that? This is just a
I'll
straw
second
vote.
that.
So, okay, so it's a straw vote. It's just some guidance from us. So Helen, your vote?
Yes.
Natalia?
Yes.
Stephen?
Sure.
Yeah, and I vote yes as well. So I guess I would suggest that when you're ready to bring this to the full committee, you don't have to bring it back to us. You can take it straight to them. And we will offer, our support in this. Anything else from anybody on this topic? Carmen, you okay? This is what you...
Yeah, I'm great. I'll talk to Gabe and Jody about next steps. As
Okay.
the timing of this is really important because we're going to start going into course selections,
Okay.
whatnot for next year. So
I mean, you can say that, this curriculum subcommittee took a straw vote and we were all in favor of
Okay.
doing this. And I don't anticipate there's really any budget implications for this. We're just talking at the moment, 2 students. That other conversation is a big conversation. We're not even going there right now. So, right, Helen? Okay.
Please
So-
don't until I get off the
No,
committee.
we're not going there right now. If you want to, when
My
you're ready to
kids
bring
would kill me if I ever voted for something like
that. Okay, we're not voting that tonight. We're not even talking about it. So
that.
do not panic or worry. Okay.
What are
Thank
we
you
not
very much,
talking
Carol.
thank you. Bye. Bye.
The sports substitution
Oh, okay.
is again hugely different.
Hugely
The
different.
scale is different.
Thank you for all your work, Carlin. We appreciate it. We actually are doing really well, and we're up to new business. I didn't know if we wanted to take this moment to just talk about maybe future topics for the curriculum subcommittee. So we just had the big one where we talked about the co-teaching. That certainly we'll go back and to visit that. Are there other topics that we want to be sure we cover before the end of this year?
Can I bring up an administrative new business topic, Suzanne, before we go into this?
Sure. Sure.
So lately I've been finding myself rooting through past curriculum subcommittee emails looking for presentations, and then also on our website. I wonder if is there a way that we I don't know what resources could be given towards this. Is there a way that presentations at the curriculum subcommittee meeting could be indexed on the website, so that they could be made available to the public and to us more easily? Because I think, as with the unleveled course conversation, past presentations could go a long way to informing the community and us on what's been previously discussed. Not just that, but I just think it would be really handy to be able to say like what has been presented to date on this topic and be able to look it up easily and quickly. especially for the curriculum subcommittee. It's just been such a rich source of presentations, many of which don't make it to the full committee. Is there,
Aren't the
what,
minutes posted, Betsy?
Yeah, I'm not
it's
supposed
not
to.
the minute that I
So-
think, oh, sorry, it's, to me, it's the presentations that are the really rich information.
Well,
I could imagine, so Neil Gudka, who's the communications specialist, I'm forgetting his title, sorry, Neil, has been also doing work on the website, so there may be a way to kind of collect his materials slightly differently, right? The current way is like chronological by meeting date, right? So finance and curriculum and full committee are sort of all woven together by date, which is great if you know the date, but if you're looking for a topic is a little bit more tricky.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe, Betsy, if this is just a piece of feedback that can be delivered to him, that if it's possible to make past presentations searchable by title. Um, I, I, just so that they could be more easily surfaced. I think that would be really useful.
I think that's a good idea. I'll follow up on that.
Thanks, Betsy.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Stephen.
the other thing, I don't know if other people have their Gmail set up where you have separate, like you have primary and then you might have another category of promotions or, can we do that with our email? So that there's a way, when there's important, one for just panelists for meetings, so we can find them.
I'm like a folder obsessive, and I always find myself rooting around for
Yeah,
like vaguely remembered presentations on special education, like disproportionality and referrals. Like, so and I always end up spending like a weird amount of time being like, I think it was the fall of 22, and I don't
and
know.
you're scrolling back through
I'm
stuff.
scrolling back, I'm performing searches, and I feel like I'm good at this, but I'm not. I don't know. It's just an endless search for me. Okay, anyway, I don't need to take up more time with this, Suzanne. Thanks.
Well, I think it's a good, and Gabe hit the nail on the head. So we definitely do a great job chronologically speaking. So everything that's presented is on the meeting date, it's public, it's there for everyone to see. But if you're looking by topic, I think really it's just as easy, though it will be time consuming to go back, but certainly easy enough to start creating when a presentation is done after today, there's a rolling spreadsheet of items, and it will say, I might do today's, and it might say wellness, and it might also be searchable by physical activity contracts. So, you can search it a few ways to find it. So I know just what you mean, and it's not really certainly hard to do going forward. It may just take a little time to catch up going back, if that makes sense. But then you'd open up a spreadsheet, you'd hit, Control F, and you would put in a keyword and you'd find what you're looking for, hopefully.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think you can go back, but I think going forward makes more sense.
yeah, we can chip away at going back, but I know what you mean. We'll certainly,
Or maybe just on certain topics,
yeah.
might be a way to look at it that seem to be more important right now.
So Betsy, you're gonna talk to Neil, are you, and just see, or
Well,
Jody?
I feel like it's something I could do. I may need I feel like I should be the one populating this searchable spreadsheet because I will have heard the presentations and will maybe know the keywords that I will put into that spreadsheet. But maybe Neil can help me figure out where to place it,
I did not mean to create work for you with a suggestion, Betsy.
No, I think it's good. Only because I'll get requests from staff and it's like, I remember that too, but when was that? Now, if it
Betsy and I had this interaction like
full
2
school
weeks ago.
committee, yeah, if I came to full school committee, I do have a searchable index, but I don't, and doesn't talk about every presentation, but it talks about every agenda item, and I can find things that way, but not for the subcommittee. So we're just kind of like you said, rooting around, knowing it's out there, but not sure where it is. So it would help all of us.
Yeah, okay, Betsy. As we say, we hate to give you more work, but let's see what you can do.
Yeah,
We
fingers crossed.
appreciate it. Yeah, we appreciate it. Yeah. What else would people, do we need to have before we get through the year, this school year? Yes, Stephen.
I'd love an update on the curriculum reviews. What's the schedule of them right now? What is the list of priorities for them? What do we think we'll get to this year, next year, the next year?
Very doable.
On all the reviews you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, because I know that there's just so many that have been scheduled, discussed. I just would love to know where they're at.
Right.
Coming up this spring, we have literacy, right? And what
Yeah,
else we
I don't
have?
mean an update on the review itself. I mean an update on the curriculum review process. Just what's the is there a schedule going out a year or 2 years? How are we looking at doing all of this?
We're actually getting ready to start a new cycle with none scheduled for next year.
Awesome.
Where because we realize we have all this information and we haven't really necessarily acted on all the information that we do have. So we're kind of pausing for next year so that we can really, in line with the strategic plan, create an action plan for the reviews that we have.
That's
this
great.
year. We're finishing our literacy review and our secondary world language review. And both of those, the committee will be updated on.
That's
When-
great. and I
when will
hope
that be?
piece-
Sometime in the spring, Helen. They're both close to wrapping up right now.
And I hope the piece that we can add in with that is sort of like a 3-year budget, outlook, so that it's not just budgeting for the review, but budgeting for what could be the follow-up to the review, like actually enacting the steps. Because I just want to be very careful that we're not spending the money for the review and not able to follow through. So I love where you're going with that, because I think that could make us much more effective.
Thank you, Sarah.
In the past, on program reviews, we used to allocate a certain amount of money for PD for it. I mean, it was together with the review. It was thought of as one thing for PD, for the rollout, for supplies, whatever.
So that's already in place.
Okay.
Okay, good.
What else do we need to follow up on? What else do we want, something new? I know you have a list over there, Jody, in your office somewhere.
My orange list on the board.
There you go. Stephen?
I guess I just have a question. So in the last version of the strategic plan, Jody, the one thing that seemed to have dropped out of it was the alternative to MCAS benchmarks. So I don't know. I didn't want to I didn't want to stop the train at that point. But I wanted to know if if looking for an alternative measure was still in the cards, and if so, what that might look like.
That's a great future presentation. We actually have a team that's finishing up some work on that right now. And we can definitely bring that to curriculum subcommittee, what the process was, and ultimately what measure is chosen.
I think that would be a great subject for curriculum.
Excellent.
Yeah, Natalia?
I mean, I'm thinking jointly maybe with DEIJ, just this concept of tracking has come up a lot as an equity related thing, but we've focused in on the high school in recent discussions, but we've also thought about the 8th to 9th. Like for me, it would be really important to think throughout the continuum and revisit that, what happens between 8th and 9th, but also what is happening in the K through. I mean, I know people who have been on school committee longer probably have had these conversations many times, but for me, it would be an important one to kind of have those conversations. I don't know when, but I assume jointly.
Yeah.
I wonder if that greater conversation is actually heterogeneous grouping, because there's times when students come together and they're tracked, and times when they're not tracked, that they end up in heterogeneous groups. So I would love to have that be a topic alongside the unleveling topic.
Are you talking
town
at the elementary
heterogeneous-
school or at the high school?
Both, just, where, just like we were going to discuss co-teaching, I think that a theme that's really important to understand is, a topic that's really important to understand is, what does it mean for the teacher to teach a group that's heterogeneous? We've talked a lot about differentiation over the years. So, what's the benefit to heterogeneous grouping? What does it look like? I think that could be really helpful for people to understand. And it feeds into the topic of unleveling, but it's sort of like it's a more broad topic because it comes up so often in classes, both K-8 as well as high school.
Just to let everyone who's watching know, we're not avoiding the topic of the 9th grade English leveling debate that will be happening on Thursday, and there'll be a full presentation. And so tune in then, that would be good. Natalia.
I have another very big picture, maybe not this year, maybe in 5 years, but has Brookline ever considered the IB program? I was mentioning it to Gabe, like the International Baccalaureate. Like, how have we ever thought about that as a program for Brookline? Helen might know if that.
No, I had actually, that hasn't come up to the best of my recollection. Graduation requirements have come up. And it used to be all you needed to have was 4 years of gym, and we called it gym at the time, and 4 years of English and US history. And that was it. And you could choose whatever you wanted. That's changed, but I don't know where we are now with high school graduation requirements and the NEAS report and all that.
Yeah, it's something Anthony still wants to look at. In particularly, our math requirements don't line up with Mass Core.
Right.
So it's a one class distinction. It's not a huge thing. And then there's some thought about maybe looking at electives a little bit differently. But Natalia, to your question, and I'll just confirm, in the time I've been here, IB has not been a topic of any deep conversation.
And not that it needs to be, but I'm thinking, like, do we ever have these very big picture, high level conversations around why we do AP versus IB? Like, like that to me is maybe, and it's not urgent in any way, but is it appropriate for school committee to be having these conversations or not? You might say curriculum is not the place, or I don't know.
I would find that fascinating. We never have that. I mean, it would just be fascinating to hear that kind of like big picture philosophy question from the leaders at BHS, like, how they think about that stuff, even if
in the summer when we have time.
Right, exactly. If we could just shut up and listen and hear how everybody thinks about this there.
Well, also early college credit or enrollment, that's kind of related in a way. Again, the big picture, what is thinking about that? Should we be thinking about participating in that for some of our students or not?
Do we already?
No, right now we're not.
Nobody takes courses at like BU or at UMass?
I mean, some people might, but it's not through a formal partnership. So like I'm aware of students, usually seniors, who might do like night classes at a school. But again, it's not formally in collaboration with Brookline High.
No, I thought we did used to, but maybe I'm wrong.
Not to my knowledge. There's a lot going on at that school though.
And another conversation, I mean, as long as we're just listing conversations, is voc ed or technical ed, and how do we feel about that, and what should we be doing? Should we be doing anything about it? Is it important? I mean, I know that we have the regional program. We have very few students who go there. I mean, it's just, another big topic to kind of talk about as well. So.
All right, I think we're really going far here. Let's bring it back in.
No, I know. These are just kind of, some days. we
Maybe
would-
Maybe a good thing is to offer a resource. Do you know that the Boston School Committee has a podcast now called Last Night at School Committee? And I don't tend to listen to them because they go over the, Boston School Committee, but they have something, a subdivision of that called Deep Dives. And some of the things that people are interested in here, I think you might be able to find on that podcast. So just a resource.
It's a great resource. I just want to be clear that it's not the school committee's podcast. It's a
Right,
private
it's-
foundation that's
It's the Shaw Family Foundation, yeah,
the Shaw Family Foundation. I just wanted to be clear that.
right. It's about the Boston School Committee. It's not from the Boston School Committee.
Got it.
Jody, are you saying that you'd like to host such a podcast?
I would love to do a version of that for it would be fun.
In her next life.
Any other topics that are on your mind that you'd like us to make a list of?
Is there anything that, Jody, in your department that you think would be helpful to air out with the curriculum subcommittee?
I think another topic for us, because we're going to be moving to change our report cards, is standards-based grading and standards-based report cards. I think that that'll be important, an important topic for us to talk about.
Do we have to approve that? Somehow I remember at one point, when the last time we did it, it was obviously way too long and way too cumbersome for anybody to do.
Yeah. I believe as a matter of practice, most committees do approve the report card.
I think so too. So that might be better to do sooner rather than later if you're planning on using a different one next year.
Maybe not next year, but we're getting set up to do standards-based reporting.
Okay.
It's one of the things we're working on.
Michelle or Dave, do you have topics you think we should be thinking about?
In danger of like the giant can of worms. I think there's probably a worthy discussion about like the DESE frameworks in general, and like the curriculum frameworks. They're different than our learning expectations in some way, right? Some of them have changed in recent years. Some of them have changed very recently. And so in this moment, I wouldn't even know how to approach it because they're so massive. Even just one grade level for one subject is massive. But like there's probably a way to consider that. And then also there'll be a new teacher evaluation rubric coming from the state. I don't know that that's necessarily a curriculum. Yep, it's a revision of the current one. We're still using the one from 2012, so we're in good shape.
The thing we didn't update. Now we can update to the new.
We skipped the 2018 revision. But
it's like they need to find something to justify what they're doing. It's crazy. I'm sorry.
I'm pretty optimistic about the new one. I think it fixes a lot of holes in the current one, and it really embeds some better thinking about what good teaching is, and raises the standard for what is defined by good teaching in the rubric pretty significantly. But again, I don't know that that's necessarily for the curriculum subcommittee, but it's certainly interesting.
So if there's all these new standards and our learning expectations are are they aligned?
No, I think, Helen, if you remember during COVID, we came to the committee and started to talk about, we can send this back to you, but we showed like our misalignment. And I think like where we started like looking at social studies and saying like, here's what our learning expectations say at second grade or at fifth grade. And here's where they fall within the standards. And I think the standards aren't new. We haven't necessarily made the shift. And so
do we think they're better? See, that I think is also do we have to do it? First, do we think they're better? And if we don't, do we have to do it? Or what is the,
I think that's the example of like
That's-
the very big, very deep conversation, right? Like
that's
I was presenting because I was social studies curriculum coordinator at the time, right? And in 2018, the new social studies frameworks were brand new. And they're places where I think they are much better and places where I think I have some concerns, and it's complicated, right?
It always is.
Yeah, I do think the one thing
I
just to
apologize, I have to
consider-
drop off.
Bye, Stephen. Thank you.
I think one thing to consider in the conversation around them, though, is that if we look at ourselves around the state and we aren't making the decision not to follow them, it puts our students in a very different place than other students, especially when they leave and go on to the college and career ready. And I think if we think back to that portrait of a graduate, which is in or a portrait of what our graduate would look like, which is in our strategic plan, then we want to be using standards that will get our students to that defined portrait.
The portrait, but that's different than the standards for the state.
Correct, but we need a roadmap to use to have our students reach what we define as the portrait. And the roadmap can be the standards.
Or
Like Gabe said, it's a deeper conversation, probably.
I mean,
The only
it's
thing
not like our kids are coming back and saying, "Oh God, you didn't teach me X, Y, and Z," or are they?
But I think it's important, to know, for example, at our last school, I think it was the last school committee meeting, somebody was talking about Holocaust education not being taught in 8th grade anymore. And the reason it's not taught in 8th grade is because the standard is actually a 10th grade standard now. And it is taught in 10th grade. You'll get an update on this Thursday, I know, but that's an important piece to note about this as well. Is
But
that
why did they
sometimes
change it to? I mean, why wouldn't we keep it at the 8th grade?
I mean,
Maybe you'll talk about it. But
yeah,
sorry.
I do want to. The one other topic I think we can have some conversation about at some point is the work that we're doing to become more aligned across our CST teams. And I think Jody talked about talking about our new benchmarks, which are going to help us do that. So maybe as we get into those benchmarks in the future, how we're using that data to make sure that we are meeting the needs of students through the CST process and how that process is unfolding.
And as part of that, Michelle, I think our new data tools that we're working with open architects to develop would be good for the subcommittee to see as well.
Absolutely. And Matt and I would be very excited to share this.
What are those called? The data tools? Is that what you said?
I said data tools.
dashboard. Yeah.
Data dashboards.
Data dashboard.
Mhm.
Okay. So it's a good list. Well, I don't think we're going to cover it all by the end of June, but we'll forward it to the next year. Any last words anybody wants to say for tonight? Helen?
But I'm just thinking of one thing that in the past we had tried to get, but I don't know if we were very successful. We talked about it, sort of follow-up studies with students once they graduate Brookline High to know where they are, what they're doing, was their education beneficial to them, And I remember Margaret Metzger used to have kids, actually this is sort of backwards, but she would have them write a letter to themselves senior year and put a stamp on it, and then she would send it to them 4 or 5 years later. It was a great exercise that she did.
yeah, I know there are folks at BHS really interested in post-graduation stuff. It's just a huge amount of work, right? Because we don't hold the kids anymore. And so they go off and we have to track them down, and there's a lot of
was really
involved in
hard.
collecting that.
Yeah.
I will say some of the emails we've gotten, especially from the SWS alum, have been really fascinating to see. And they've talked about, some of the work they're doing now and how prepared they felt when they went off to college. And it's a very small sample, but it's fun to read. And I know that was such a good program for so many of the kids.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll call it an evening. So we've got 6 o'clock, so we've got plenty of time. We're doing fine.
Sorry, is this
It's a
6
very
o'clock in person, just to make sure that I get there?
No,
No, it's no.
It's
It's only
but
Zoom.
we have a different Zoom link, Betsy?
That's correct, a separate Zoom link. You should have the calendar invite.
Okay, I'll look for it. Thank you.
yeah, no, and it should be very quick. It's,
It's just one
very-
vote. Right.
one
Thank you.
vote, and that's it.
Thank you to everyone being flexible that we switched from hybrid to full Zoom, but that seems to be fine. And have a good evening, everyone. And oh, you know what? Betsy, I'm not sure I can make the March meeting, so we may have to reschedule it a week out, but we'll let you know if that's okay. Okay, have a good evening and thank you, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you.